It happened on Christmas Eve, the kind of night that always promised warmth, but only delivered glass-cold pressure. The fireplace glowed, the crystal glasses chimed, and my father's voice, deep commanding final, cut through the laughter like a snapped thread. "Olivia," he said, raising his glass for the whole table to hear, "you'll never earn $1 on your own. Not one." I smiled because I'd learned that's what you do when you're dying inside. I didn't know it then, but that single sentence would become the spark that burned his empire down. The Taylor mansion glittered that night like it always did, strings of gold lights, a 10-foot tree perfectly symmetrical in the center of the ballroom, and 100 guests pretending our family was something worth envying. I stood near the bar holding a glass of champagne I couldn't bring myself to drink. The room smelled of cinnamon pine and the faint chill of New York winter sneaking in every time the door opened. My mother, Catherine, drifted between guests like a diplomat at peace talks, pretending she didn't notice the frost between me and my father. He was Edward Taylor, founder and patriarch of Taylor and Finch Capital. In our world, his name opened doors and closed them if he chose. My father wasn't the kind of man who raised children. He bred successors. My older brother, Ethan, fit the role perfectly. Clean-cut, predictable, obedient. I was the anomaly, the daughter who'd left the family firm to build something digital, as he sneered as though entrepreneurship were a disease. When he tapped his glass for attention, the chatter dimmed to polite silence. He stood tall, a monument to the legacy he alone revered. "To family," he said, smiling at the crowd. "To my son who's leading our next acquisition with precision and strength." Applause. Ethan blushed modestly. My turn came next, and the temperature in the room dropped. And to my daughter, my father continued, that smile tightening into cruelty. "Our little visionary. Chasing tech dreams. Was it, I suppose, someone has to lose money for the rest of us to make it?" Laughter followed. Not loud, not cruel, worse. It was the kind of laughter people use when they want to belong to power. I felt every muscle in my face lock into a polite grin. I told myself I wouldn't let him get to me this year. But hearing him say it, hearing that word lose, still hit me like a slap. Ethan leaned over, whispering, "He doesn't mean it, Liv." But he did. He always did. My father's words were never accidents. They were architecture, designed to remind me of my place beneath his legacy, beneath his son, beneath everything he built. My mother tried to change the subject. "Edward, that's enough," she murmured. But my father wasn't done. No, he said, eyes locked on me. "Let's be honest. Olivia's always been the dreamer. She thinks crypto will replace cash, algorithms will replace judgment. Maybe she'll get lucky." The sound of his glass clinking on the marble table felt final, like a gavel. I set mine down before my hands could tremble. "Maybe luck's just another word for timing," I said quietly. He smirked. "Then perhaps your timing's as poor as your investments." The guest laughed again. The walls seemed to tilt. I excused myself, walked past the decorated tree, and stepped out into the cold. The night air bit at my skin, sharp and clean, real unlike the air inside. My breath turned to mist as I stared out over the Hudson. Somewhere behind me, carolers sang about peace on earth. I should have cried. Instead, I laughed. A quiet, broken sound that turned into resolve. He wanted me small, embarrassed, dependent. But he'd just given me something else, clarity. My phone buzzed in my clutch. Unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something in me, instinct, maybe made me answer. "Ms. Taylor," a voice said, smooth and professional. "This is Clara Meyer from UBS Private Banking. Congratulations, you've officially qualified as a private client." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "I think you have the wrong person," I said. "No mistake," she replied. "Your assets just crossed the threshold this morning. Total balance, including equity holdings, $8.6 million. We'll be assigning you a dedicated portfolio team effective immediately." The cold vanished. The world narrowed to her words, $8.6 million. I'd been working for years in silence, coding, building, trading, reinvesting. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every hidden risk had just crystallized into that number. "I see," I managed, voice steady. "Thank you, Clara. Of course. And Merry Christmas. When I turned around, my mother stood at the doorway framed by the golden light of the ballroom. Her eyes were wide, uncertain. Olivia. Who was that? I smiled. Not the practiced one I'd worn all evening, but something real sharp, alive. My banker, I said. What she began. But I walked past her, back into the room. The crowd had gathered near the piano, singing off-key. My father stood by the hearth, basking in the praise of men who owed him money. He turned as I approached, his smile automatic, his tone still dripping with condescension. Back so soon, he asked. Didn't find your investors out there? Actually, I said, setting my phone on the table. They found me. Before he could respond, the phone buzzed again, Clara's number lighting up the screen. I pressed the speaker. Ms. Taylor, Clara's voice carried clearly over the hum of conversation. Just confirming your UBS account activation. Congratulations again on becoming one of our preferred clients. The room went silent. My father blinked. Preferred client. Yes, sir, Clara said cheerfully. Private banking tier. Total portfolio value. 8.6 million. Would you like me to confirm the transfer schedule? Ms. Taylor? My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Ethan froze mid-sip. And my father? Edward Taylor, man of legacy, lord of control, went pale. The glass in his hand trembled. No, I said softly. That won't be necessary. Thank you, Clara. Of course. Merry Christmas, Ms. Taylor. I ended the call. Silence filled the space where his authority used to be. Even the fire seemed to hesitate. My mother looked at me, not angry, not proud, just speechless. My father's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. 8.6 million. Give or take, I said. Turns out timing isn't so poor after all. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. The silence was the victory I'd been waiting for. The string quartet started playing again awkwardly, trying to reset the mood. I picked up my champagne glass, finally took a sip, and turned to leave. Outside, the snow had started to fall, soft, quiet, endless. I looked up at the sky and thought, Merry Christmas, Dad. Because for the first time in my life, it truly was. The morning after that Christmas night, the city looked untouched, clean cold, and mercilessly indifferent. I woke to sunlight slicing through the blinds of my apartment, the kind of light that makes you wonder if what happened the night before was real, or just a feverish blur fueled by exhaustion and the metallic tang of betrayal. But the phone on my nightstand said otherwise. 16 missed calls from my mother. 3 from Ethan. 1 text from my father, just 2 words, call me. I didn't. Instead, I brewed coffee, black and bitter, and watched the snow melt on the fire escape. I felt a strange calm, the kind of quiet that means the foundation has shifted and the rebuilding can finally begin. There was nothing left to brace for. I opened my laptop, logged into my UBS dashboard, and there it was again, the number. My heart didn't race this time. It just steadied. Years of building, trading, coding, waiting all hidden behind silence and understatement had finally turned into something tangible. It wasn't about the money. It was the proof that I'd been right, that I wasn't the failure my father needed me to be to feel like a success. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old radiator. My studio wasn't much, one window overlooking a gray sliver of the East River, a futon that doubled as my bed, a desk littered with notebooks and coffee cups. The air smelled of cold espresso and late nights. I'd chosen it precisely because it didn't feel like home. Home for me had become synonymous with judgment. By 9 a.m., the calls started again. This time I answered. Olivia. My mother's voice cracked a mixture of relief and fury. Do you have any idea what you did last night? I think I do, I said. Your father humiliated me in front of 50 people, I interrupted. That part I remembered clearly. She sighed that long theatrical sigh that meant she wanted to sound composed, but was seconds away from falling apart. You embarrassed him. You embarrassed all of us. You made a scene. I laughed softly. I didn't make a scene, Mom. I answered a phone call. There was silence on her end. Then quieter. Edward didn't deserve that. Did I? She didn't reply. I almost felt sorry for her. She'd spent 30 years translating my father's cruelty into what she called concern. It was easier to label abuse as tradition than to admit weakness. Finally, she said, "Your father wants to see you. I have a company to run. Olivia, he's still your father. And I'm still disappointed in him. Nothing's changed except now I can afford to ignore it." I hung up before her voice could turn into guilt. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just tired of playing my assigned role. By noon, I was back at my desk, sketching ideas for Aurora, the platform that had quietly consumed every waking hour of my life for the past 3 years. Aurora wasn't just a trading system. It was a hybrid model that used emotional analytics to predict market behavior. Everyone said finance was numbers and logic. I'd always believed it was emotion and timing. People didn't buy or sell because of numbers, they did it because of fear, greed, hope, ego. I'd built a system that understood all four. While the rest of Wall Street was drowning in algorithms that screamed precision, I was building one that whispered humanity. It had started as a theory, a passion project after I left Taylor & Finch. Back then, I'd had no funding, no support, no investors, just a half-broken laptop, a few savings from my last bonus, and the stubborn belief that I could create something better. The first version of Aurora crashed 5 times before it ever ran a successful test. The 6th time it worked. And now UBS wanted in. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, Geneva code. I smiled. "Clara," I said as I answered. "Good morning, Ms. Taylor. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. You're calling from Switzerland. It's always a good time." She laughed softly. "We've reviewed your portfolio and UBS is prepared to offer a partnership opportunity. Your model has caught attention. Our Zurich branch director wants to discuss acquisition options." My fingers froze over the keyboard. Acquisition or collaboration, whichever you prefer. They see potential in your behavioral prediction system. They believe it could redefine private investment strategy. I leaned back, staring at the skyline beyond my window. It was strange how quiet success sounded. "Tell them I'll think about it." "Of course. And Olivia, congratulations again. What you built is extraordinary." When the call ended, I just sat there staring at the city. Extraordinary. That word had never been used to describe me in my father's house. By evening, I finally left the apartment. I wandered past Rockefeller Center, where families were still taking pictures under the massive Christmas tree. They were still there somewhere, replaying the same dinner, the same hierarchy, the same legacy that was already crumbling. I stopped at a small cafe, the kind of place my father would have dismissed as quaint. I ordered a slice of apple pie and a coffee. The waitress smiled. "Rough day," I smiled back. "The best one I've had in years." I didn't linger. I walked through the city feeling the new kind of power that wasn't about revenge or validation, but quiet, absolute control. The UBS acquisition offer was the first move on a new chessboard, one where I finally dictated the play. That night, as I turned off the lights, I didn't look at the bank app. I looked at the window where the city hummed with opportunity. 8.6 million was the key, but Aurora was the engine. And I knew with absolute certainty I was about to turn that engine toward Taylor & Finch. The email came on a Tuesday morning, subject line precise and devoid of enthusiasm, UBS Strategic Collaboration Proposal. I almost ignored it. After months of building, I'd learned that offers usually came wrapped in flattery and fine print. But this one was from Clara Meyer, the same voice that had once told me, "Congratulations, you're now a private client." That voice had changed my life once. Maybe it will again. I opened the message. "Ms. Taylor, UBS Global Strategy Division would like to invite you to Geneva for a preliminary discussion on potential partnerships involving Aurora Analytics. Best Clara Meyer, Managing Director, UBS Global Innovation Geneva." Just seeing the word made my pulse quicken. My father had always called it the center of real money. His world. His domain. I smiled. By noon, I was at the airport. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just forward motion. I sat by the window with my laptop open, scanning through the latest data from Aurora's emotional market model. The graphs danced with color sentiment spikes, trading surges consumer fear indexes. It wasn't just code anymore. It was alive. The flight to Switzerland was quiet, long, and strangely calm. I didn't watch movies or sleep. I just thought about everything that had led here. About how every cruel comment my father had made had turned into fuel. About the version of myself who used to crave his approval sitting at the same dining table every Christmas. When the plane landed, Geneva looked exactly like I imagined: precise, cold, expensive. The city felt meticulously crafted. I checked into a hotel that smelled faintly of cedar and new beginnings, and that night I couldn't sleep, not from nerves, but from the weight of possibility. The next morning, a black car arrived to take me to the UBS headquarters, a tower of chiseled concrete and reflective glass, where efficiency was the only religion. Inside, everything gleamed: white marble floors, hushed voices, efficiency so seamless it felt rehearsed. Clara met me in the lobby, tall, poised with that European ease that made confidence look like art. "Olivia," she said warmly, extending her hand. "It's good to finally meet you in person." "Likewise," I said. "I've heard that voice in my head since Christmas." She laughed, genuine and soft. "Ah, the famous call, I remember. I don't often get to change my life mid-holiday." We took the elevator to the 29th floor. The walls were glass. The view was endless, and I could almost see my father's old boardroom reflected in it. But this time, I was the one walking in. "Your system impressed our analytics division," Clara began as we sat down. "Aurora doesn't just predict, it interprets emotion. That's something the markets never fully quantified." I nodded. "That's because most people in finance pretend emotions don't exist. But fear and greed are what drive everything." She smiled. "Exactly. We're looking for collaboration. UBS could provide global data access and institutional infrastructure. In return, we'd like a minority stake in Aurora." The word minority was deliberate, respectful. How much, I asked. 10%, she said, at a valuation of $60 million. I felt the air shift. $60 million. I'd started this with nothing but a used laptop and stubborn faith. I kept my voice even. "That's generous?" "It's strategic," Clara said, studying me. "We believe Aurora could redefine behavioral investing. But we also believe its creator has more to offer than algorithms." I raised an eyebrow. "Meaning," she leaned back slightly. "Meaning leadership. We're building a new global initiative, human-centered finance, a movement to bring empathy back into economics. We'd like you to lead it." The room felt suddenly smaller. "Led it, yes. You'd head our emotional analytics expansion division. Independent partnership, full creative control. Geneva first, then New York." For a long moment, I said nothing. Somewhere deep in me, I heard my father's voice again. "You'll never earn a dollar." I almost laughed. "Clara," I said slowly, "what made you reach out to me?" She studied me for a second before answering. "Because you built something that doesn't just work, it understands why people work the way they do. You saw humanity where others saw numbers. We need that." Her tone was calm, but her words landed with quiet certainty. We talked for another hour. Details, projections, expansion strategies. She wanted to schedule a press announcement for early summer. I agreed almost absently, as if I were watching someone else's life unfold. When I left the building, the sky was heavy with snow, soft flakes falling like silence made visible. The city buzzed faintly below, orderly and muted. I stopped at the edge of the plaza and looked up at the UBS tower, its logo glinting silver against the gray. I felt the weight of the future, vast and open. That night I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. "Olivia." "I'm in Geneva," I said. A pause. "With the bank, yes. They offered a partnership. And something else, a chance to lead a global program." I expected surprise, maybe even pride, but her response was quieter. "Your father heard. He didn't take it well." I sighed. "He never does." "He's proud," she said quickly, too quickly. "He just doesn't know how to say it. He never will." The silence stretched. Then she whispered, "He's not as strong as he used to be. You don't have to forgive him, but maybe don't forget he's still human." The next morning, I took an early walk by Lake Geneva. The water reflected the city heavy and demanding. I tossed a pebble and watched the ripples spread outward, fading slowly into calm. That's what I wanted my action to be, not loud, not perfect, just rippling outward, quietly changing the surface of things. My phone buzzed. Clara again. "Olivia." She said, her tone brisk but kind. "Our board approved. The contract's ready. Congratulations, you're about to become UBS's youngest innovation partner based in our New York office." I looked out at the water one last time and smiled. "Tell them," I said, my voice hardening with resolve. "I accept. And I'm ready to begin disrupting the status quo." The jet descended into New York just past midnight, the skyline glittering not as a monument to his control, but as a territory I was ready to claim. I hadn't been home in months. Geneva had changed me: quiet mornings, efficient conversations, no one questioning if I belonged. Now, as the city came into view again, I could almost feel my old life pulling at me, the weight of unfinished business settling over my shoulders, heavy and sharp as a tailored coat. I checked my phone before we landed. Dozens of messages, a few congratulatory notes from investors, 3 missed calls from my mother, and 1 short text from my brother Ethan: "Dad wants a meeting. Tomorrow, noon. Don't make it worse." I laughed under my breath. Worse was such a Taylor word. It meant out of control, unacceptable, anything we didn't plan. The car waiting at JFK had the family crest still stitched on the headrest, a symbol of the empire I'd been exiled from, and ironically now had the power to buy. The city moved outside the window in a blur of lights and noise, but all I could see was that night from last Christmas. His glass raised, his words slicing through me. "You'll never earn $1. I'd earned $8.6 million. And now with the UBS partnership, I was worth 10 times that. Still, money wasn't what this meeting was about. This was about history, about pride, about finally standing in the same room as him and not flinching. The next morning, I walked into the Taylor and Finch headquarters for the first time since I'd quit. The security guard blinked in confusion when I gave my name. "You're cleared," he said finally, scanning the guest list. "Conference room, top floor." The elevator ride was long enough to feel like an omen. I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Same face, different woman. When the doors opened, the office smelled faintly of old varnish and power. My father was already there, standing by the window, his posture straight, his control intact. He didn't turn when I entered. "You're punctual," he said. "I learned that from you," I replied. He finally faced me. His hair was grayer, his expression unreadable. "You've made quite a spectacle of yourself." "If success is a spectacle," I said evenly, "then I suppose I have." He gestured to the seat opposite him. "Sit. We'll be brief." I didn't sit. I prefer to stand. He exhaled, the faintest trace of irritation flickering across his face. "Geneva," he began. "UBS. Global initiative. You've made waves. That's the goal. You're using the Taylor name. It's mine too." That shut him up for a moment. Then he said, "Do you have any idea what your actions look like? Partnering with our rivals, building systems that challenge our investment model? You mean systems that actually work?" His voice sharpened. "You've built technology that undermines my business. That's not innovation, that's rebellion. Maybe those two things aren't as different as you think." The silence stretched thin. Outside, the skyline shimmered, a reminder of the world that kept moving whether he approved or not. Finally, he said, quieter now, "You think you're different from me, but you're not. You just found another way to control the market." I met his gaze. "I'm not trying to control it, Dad. I'm trying to understand it." He turned back to the window. "You could have come back, Olivia. You could have taken your place here. But instead you chose to compete with me." "I didn't choose this war," I said. "You did the moment you made my worth conditional on obedience." He flinched barely. "But I saw it. Ethan's been struggling," he said after a moment. "He's not as strong as I'd hoped." I waited. I knew what was coming. I need help. There was. The unthinkable. Edward Taylor admitting weakness. Help, I asked softly. He nodded once as if it hurt. We're losing clients. Institutional investors are shifting toward algorithmic platforms, behavioral models. Like yours. UBS is taking some of our biggest accounts. If we don't pivot, Taylor and Finch could face restructuring. For a long moment, I said nothing. The man who'd told me I'd never earn $1 was now asking me to save his fortune. Finally, I said, You taught me something, Dad, that weakness is fatal in finance. You made sure I learned that lesson early. His eyes flicked toward me, sharp and defensive. Are you enjoying this? No, I said honestly, but I'm not apologizing for surviving it. He sat down slowly like a man who just realized he was standing on ice. What do you want, Olivia? The question caught me off guard. For years, all I'd wanted was to prove him wrong. But now, I wasn't sure. I want freedom, I said. From you. From your legacy. From every expectation I never asked to inherit. His expression cracked just slightly. Then take it. But remember, the name that gave you power can take it away. I smiled, calm and cold. That's where you're wrong. The name didn't give me power. You did the moment you underestimated me. He said nothing. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. Finally, I picked up my bag. You'll be fine, Dad. You always are. As I walked toward the elevator, he said quietly, Olivia. I stopped but didn't turn. Don't destroy what I built just to prove you can. I looked back at him, his reflection caught in the glass, the king of a crumbling castle. Then stop pretending what you built can't change. The elevator doors closed, cutting him off mid-breath. Downstairs, the city was alive again, people rushing taxis, honking life, moving on. I stepped into the cold and took a deep breath. It didn't feel like running away this time. It felt like reclaiming ground that was always mine. That night, as I sat in my apartment overlooking the river, my phone buzzed with a message from Clara. The UBS board approved your expansion proposal. Your first mandate is assessing the potential acquisition of a struggling mid-size firm with strong algorithmic ties. Let's talk about strategy tomorrow. I stared at the message, the city lights reflecting off the screen like tiny constellations. Somewhere uptown, my father was probably still pacing, still trying to control the narrative. And for the first time, I didn't care. Because this wasn't his story anymore. It was mine. The first sign that things were about to change came not from UBS, not from the market, but from a rumor, the kind that travels by raised eyebrow and hushed phone call before landing as concrete fact. Someone at Taylor and Finch was leaking internal reports. By the time it reached my inbox, the message was simple and unsentimental. Your father's firm is bleeding. Fast. I stared at the screen in silence. It didn't surprise me. I'd seen it coming for months, the rigid old strategies, the resistance to change, the arrogance that turned stability into stagnation. But knowing it was happening and seeing it in writing were two very different things. That morning, UBS's Manhattan branch buzzed with activity. My team was gathered in the conference room, sleek glass walls, black coffee, and the quiet hum of power. Clara had flown in from Geneva for the week. Her presence both grounding and electric. Taylor and Finch's quarterly numbers dropped 30%, she said, clicking through a series of slides. Institutional clients are shifting to automated platforms. They refuse to adapt. They're panicking. I kept my face composed. Let them. She glanced at me over her glasses. You're enjoying this. I hesitated. I'm not celebrating their failure. I'm just acknowledging justice when I see it. Justice and revenge, she said lightly, are rarely the same currency. The room went quiet. She wasn't wrong. After the meeting, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window watching the city churn below. New York looked the same as ever, a blur of motion and ambition, but something in me had shifted. The old hurt that used to burn in my chest every time my father dismissed me was fading, replaced by something colder, sharper. Pity, maybe. Or perspective. My phone buzzed again. Ethan. Dad wants to see you. It's urgent. I didn't respond right away. The last meeting had left scars I wasn't sure I wanted reopened, but curiosity won out. That evening, I found myself outside the old family townhouse on East 75th. The doorman gave me a hesitant smile. He remembered me from when I used to live there before my life had imploded into exile. I climbed the stairs slowly, the air heavy with memory. My mother opened the door. She looked older, thinner, but still composed. The study where every humiliation had unfolded waited. He was sitting behind his desk, the empire builder turned crisis manager. The man who once owned every room he walked into now looked smaller, his expensive desk a fortress that no longer held a king. "Close the door," he said. I did. He didn't look up from the papers on his desk. "You've heard?" "Yes. The losses are real. Clients are leaving. UBS took 3 of our largest institutional accounts." I met his eyes. "That wasn't personal." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Everything's personal in this city." He pushed a folder toward me. "Here, read it." Inside were the numbers, red lines, negative margins, a steady downward slide. Taylor and Finch wasn't just struggling. It was sinking. "I need a partner," he said. I blinked. "You're asking me to invest." "I'm offering you an opportunity," he said evenly. "You have resources, access, and technology. We have legacy and structure. Together, we could rebuild." The silence between us stretched long enough for me to hear the clock ticking on the mantel. I thought of all the times he'd told me my work was a fantasy. All the dinners where I'd been the joke, not the heir. And now he was asking for help. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "You have Ethan. You have your board. You have everything you ever wanted." His shoulders stiffened. "Ethan isn't ready. He's not you." For the first time, I heard something break in his voice. Not pride, but something deeper. Regret. I could have said yes. It would have been the noble thing to do, the daughter's redemption arc. But the nobility had no return on investment. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I can't save you from what you built." He stood, his face hardening. "You're making a mistake." Maybe I said, moving toward the door, "But it's mine to make." He didn't stop me this time. Outside, the winter air hit me like truth, sharp, undeniable cleansing. I walked until my hands went numb, until the city noise drowned out the echoes of his voice. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and stared at the dashboard. Aurora's expansion numbers were surging. UBS had just finalized another funding round. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Clara called that night. Her voice was steady, practical. "We're moving faster than expected. You're going to need a bigger team." "Good," I said. "Let's scale." "Olivia," she said after a pause, "you're working like someone trying to outrun something." "Maybe I am." "What is it?" "The past," I said simply. She didn't push. She just said, "Then keep running. But don't forget to look up." After the call, I stood by the window, the city glowing like an endless constellation of opportunity and ghosts. My reflection stared back at me, not the daughter who used to crave approval, not the woman who'd been humiliated at a Christmas table, but something else entirely. A survivor. I whispered it aloud, testing the word in the dark. It felt real. Down below, snow began to fall again, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. By morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Not to save my father, but to build something he could never destroy. The call came before sunrise. I was half awake. The city still quiet outside my window when Clara's voice broke through the stillness. "Olivia, are you sitting down? I'm listening." UBS just secured an introduction with Lioncrest Capital. They're interested in Aurora. That name alone sent a jolt through me. Lioncrest wasn't just another investment firm, it was a shadow empire, a private consortium known for buying the future before the rest of the world knew it existed. If they were interested, it meant Aurora had outgrown my imagination. When I asked, "They want a presentation. This week. In Singapore." Singapore. It's the regional center for their tech division. They're prepared to offer a joint venture or full acquisition depending on your terms. I sat up, adrenaline cutting through the last of my sleep. Book the flight. By the time my plane touched down at Changi Airport, I was running on caffeine spreadsheets and the kind of high-voltage focus that made my pulse steady until everything felt sharp. The air was dense, tropical electric, a world away from the icy calm of Geneva or the sharp edges of New York. Lioncrest's offices were perched above Marina Bay, a glass cathedral overlooking the city's pulse. Their managing director, Marcus Lee, met me in the lobby. Mid-40s, elegant but efficient, with the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen too many billion-dollar pitches. "Ms. Taylor," he said, shaking my hand. "We've been following Aurora for some time." "Then you know it's not just a trading model," I said. He smiled faintly. "That's why we're here." We walked through hallways lined with digital art and live data streams, the hum of finance in motion. In the conference room, his team was already assembled. Laptops open, eyes sharp. Clara joined via video, her voice steady as ever. I began the presentation. "Aurora doesn't predict the market," I said. "It understands it. It reads the emotional temperature of global investors, fear, greed, anticipation, and translates that into behavioral shifts before they happen." The room was silent except for the hum of the servers. I showed them case studies, UBS's pilot program, the European test runs, the predictive accuracy rate hovering near perfection. When I finished, Marcus leaned back, thoughtful. "Impressive," he said. "But algorithms fail. What makes you so sure this one won't?" "Because it's not an algorithm," I said. "It's an evolution." He smiled, not the polite kind, but the dangerous one. "I like you, Ms. Taylor. You speak like someone who knows she's already won." "I don't believe in winning," I replied. "Only in progress." He tapped his pen against the table. "We're prepared to make an offer. $30 million for a controlling interest." The number hung in the air like a siren. Even through the screen, Clara inhaled sharply. I didn't answer immediately. I looked out the window. The skyline glittered like ambition itself. I thought about my father's words, my mother's silence every moment I'd been told to stay small. Then I turned back to Marcus. "No." His eyebrows lifted. "No, I'm not selling Aurora," I said. "Not even half. But I'll partner. Equal terms." He studied me for a long moment. "You realize we rarely offer equal footing." "Then this will be your first time," I said. The corner of his mouth twitched. "You drive a hard bargain. I drive on my own terms." The silence that followed was thick, almost electric. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Ms. Taylor. 50-50 partnership. 30 million investment split leadership. But you'll have to relocate here for oversight." "Relocate." "It's standard," he said. "Singapore will become Aurora's new headquarters. You'll have autonomy, but we want you close." I hesitated. Moving across the world wasn't in the plan. But something about the offer, the scope, the challenge, the audacity felt right. "Send the paperwork," I said. That night I stood on the hotel balcony overlooking Marina Bay, watching the reflection of the city ripple across the water. I'd just turned down the kind of deal most founders would kill for, and rewritten it on my own terms. It didn't feel like luck. It felt like reclamation. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Dad's losing it. He found out about Lioncrest. Said you're turning the family into a headline." I typed back without thinking. Maybe it's time we had better headlines. Then I turned the phone off. The next morning I met Marcus again to finalize the agreement. The signatures were digital, the ink metaphorical, but the moment was real. $30 million, a global partnership. He extended his hand. "Welcome to the future, Ms. Taylor." I shook it steady. "No," I said quietly. "Welcome to mine." As I left the building, the tropical air wrapped around me, warm, thick, alive. Somewhere between exhaustion and triumph, I realized something had shifted permanently. I was no longer building to prove anyone wrong. I was building because I could. That night from the window of my new temporary apartment, I watched the city glow. The time difference meant that back in New York, my father was probably still pacing his office watching the empire he'd built begin to crack. But I wasn't thinking about him anymore. I was thinking about what came next, the next system, the next idea, the next version of myself. And for the first time since I could remember, the future didn't scare me. It felt inevitable. The first time Aurora went silent, it was just past 3 in the morning. I was in my Singapore apartment surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and the hum of my monitors when every line of data on my screen froze, then vanished. At first I thought it was a network issue. The city never really slept somewhere. Someone was always coding, trading, recalibrating. But this wasn't lag. This was a violation. Within seconds, the backup server blinked out too. Aurora had never done that before. I called the data center, pinged the backup nodes I ordered, trying to keep my voice calm. The tech on the other end sounded nervous. "We already did, Ms. Taylor. All nodes are operational except yours. My system. My creation. Gone." I disconnected and stared at the empty screen. A slow pulse of unease crawled through me. Aurora wasn't supposed to crash, it was self-healing, adaptive. It didn't fail. I rebooted manually, bypassing the firewall, diving into the raw code. The system came back to life, but not as I'd left it. There was a new line buried deep in the mainframe. A signature that wasn't mine. Finch Protocol 01. My father's company. For a second, I thought it was a coincidence. But then I found another line encrypted under the architecture. A trace link routed through a Manhattan IP address I knew too well. Taylor and Finch's internal servers. My father had broken into my system. By the time the sun came up, I was still sitting there, jaw tight, hands trembling slightly. Part of me wanted to laugh. He'd always accused me of playing with digital toys, and now here he was, trying to steal one. At 8 sharp, I called Clara. She answered on the first ring. "You sound awake." "I found something." I sent her the data string. There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then, Jesus. That's a corporate breach. A serious one. From my father's firm. "Are you certain?" "Yes." She exhaled. "This changes everything." "No," I said quietly. "It clarifies everything." Within hours, the internal investigation was underway. Lioncrest's cyber team confirmed the intrusion. Someone at Taylor and Finch had accessed Aurora's test algorithms through a proxy chain. It wasn't random. It was targeted. That evening, Marcus called from the Singapore office. "We can pursue legal action," he said. "Data theft, corporate espionage, the works. But this will go public." "Are you ready for that?" "I was born ready for that," I said. He smiled faintly. "That's what I thought." Still, when the first report hit the financial press, legacy firm under fire for corporate hacking allegations, I felt something twist inside me. Not triumph. Something closer to sadness. Because this wasn't a war between competitors anymore. This was blood. 2 days later, my mother called. "Olivia," she whispered. "What have you done?" "What he forced me to do." Her voice cracked. "He didn't mean for this to happen. He's furious. Yes, but he's scared. They're saying he could lose everything, the board. The firm, his reputation, I said sharply. He tried to steal my life's work. He says it was a misunderstanding. He says that about everything." She was crying now. "You've both gone too far." "He doesn't sleep. He keeps asking how it came to this." I closed my eyes. It came to this the day he told me I'd never earn $1. The line went quiet. That night I couldn't focus. Every sound from the city felt louder, the traffic below, the whir of the ceiling fan, even my own heartbeat. I tried to drown it out with work, but the code blurred in front of me. Somewhere between the numbness of the betrayal and the cold logic of revenge, I realized that I didn't just want to win anymore. I wanted to end this. The next morning, Marcus called again. "We have confirmation," he said. "Your father authorized the breach personally. He ordered a senior engineer to clone Aurora's sentiment modules." For a long time, I said nothing. Then, "What happens now?" "That's up to you," Marcus replied. "We can take this to court, or we can use it." "Use it how?" He leaned forward, voice calm but precise. "We control the narrative. We expose the truth, but not as victims, as visionaries. We time it with Aurora's global rollout. We let the world see that the old guard is collapsing while the future stands here. The strategy was ruthless. The timing was surgical. I took a deep breath, recognizing the precision that defined my father's best moves, but this time turning it toward justice. I nodded. Do it. By the end of the week, the headlines were everywhere. Taylor and Finch, accused of attempted data theft from rising AI firm. Old Wall Street versus New World Finance. The story spread like a virus through the financial sector. Reporters camped outside the Taylor offices. Stockholders panicked. Within 48 hours, the firm's valuation dropped nearly 40%. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. The night the news broke, Clara called. Her voice was soft. He'll step down. It's only a matter of time. I know. Are you okay? I don't know. I stood by the window looking out at the glowing skyline. I had everything I thought I wanted: money, power, recognition. But the price was silence. The kind that follows after a storm when all that's left is debris. Then quietly Clara said, "You didn't destroy him, Olivia. He destroyed himself." Maybe she was right. But the truth was messier than that. I'd been part of the fire, even if I didn't light it first. Before I went to sleep that night, I opened Aurora's interface one last time. The code shimmered steady again, alive, breathing pure. My creation had survived betrayal, violation, and legacy. As I watched the data flow back into rhythm, I realized something that both hurt and healed at once. I wasn't just my father's daughter anymore. I had become the code he couldn't delete. It happened faster than anyone expected. Within a week of the breach scandal, Taylor and Finch began to unravel like an old tapestry dissolving into smoke. Clients fled, board members turned on each other, and every financial journalist in New York smelled blood. By the time I saw the first headline, "Legacy Empire Faces Possible Bankruptcy Amid Espionage Scandal," the story had already metastasized into legend. My father's empire was burning and no one could stop it. I watched it all unfold from across the ocean, sitting in the sleek glass tower that now bore my company's name on its lobby plaque, Aurora Global Technologies. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a funeral I hadn't planned to attend. Clara walked into my office that morning holding a stack of reports. "They've suspended trading of Taylor and Finch's public bonds," she said. "The board issued a statement this morning. Edward Taylor has stepped down." I didn't look up. Voluntarily, officially yes, unofficially, they pushed him out. The silence between us was thick. Clara placed the papers on my desk and hesitated. "He's finished, Olivia. You've won." I turned toward the window, the skyline of Singapore glittering beneath the rising sun. "I didn't want to win like this." "Yes, you did," she said gently. "You just didn't want to admit it." She wasn't wrong. For years I'd imagined this moment, the day the man who belittled me would finally have to face the truth. But now that it was here, the satisfaction was fleeting, hollow. Because when you grow up fighting for approval, even victory tastes like loss. Later that day, my phone buzzed. A single text from Ethan. He's in the hospital. "Heart attack. You should come." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, without thinking, I grabbed my coat and left. The flight back to New York felt like traveling through lead. The city greeted me with its usual indifference: gray sky, honking taxis, winter slush, gathering along the sidewalks. I took a cab straight to Mount Sinai. The smell of antiseptic hit me as soon as I stepped through the doors, and for a brief second, I felt 10 years old again, waiting for him to come home from another business emergency. My mother was in the waiting area, her face pale and drawn. When she saw me, something fragile flickered behind her eyes. Relief, exhaustion, maybe both. "He's stable," she whispered. "The doctors say it was mild, but it scared him. Does he know I'm here?" She nodded. "He asked for you." The words landed like a blow. I walked into his room. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms and brokered billion-dollar deals now looked impossibly small against the white sheets. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, an oxygen tube tracing the sharp line of his nose. When he opened his eyes, they found mine immediately. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a voice rough from disuse, he said, "You came." "I did." "You shouldn't have." "Then why did you ask?" He smiled faintly, the ghost of his old arrogance flickering and fading. "Habit, I guess." I pulled a chair close but didn't sit. "The firm's collapsing." "I know. You did this to yourself." He closed his eyes again. "Maybe. Or maybe I did it to you first." That stopped me. He continued, his voice quieter now. "I spent your whole life trying to shape you into something I could understand. But you were never supposed to fit into my world. You were supposed to build your own." The words came slow, deliberate, like each one cost him something. "You were right, Olivia," he said. "About everything. The algorithms, the emotion, the future. I just couldn't see it through my pride. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would protect me from the ache rising in my throat. But all I managed was, 'It's too late for that.'" He gave a small, broken laugh. "Maybe. But you should know, I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was trying to keep you from becoming me." That was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. I sat down then, the chair cold against my legs. "You did anyway." He nodded weakly. "And you fixed it." For the first time, there was no fight left between us. Just silence, heavy, complicated, and human. When I left the hospital, the sky had turned the color of steel. Snow was beginning to fall again, coating the city in something soft enough to disguise its edges. I walked without direction until I found myself standing outside Taylor & Finch's headquarters. The building looked smaller now, somehow ordinary. Through the glass doors, I could see the lobby stripped of its grandeur, its walls bare where the company's logo had been removed. For years, this place had been my father's cathedral. Now it was just another address. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Clara. "How is he?" she asked. "Alive," I said. "But I don't know for how long." She was quiet. "And you?" I looked up at the sky, snow catching in my hair. For the first time, I said slowly, "I think I'm free." That night, back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and logged into Aurora's new dashboard. The global rollout was complete. Thousands of users in 20 countries. Real-time sentiment tracking. It was everything I dreamed of, and yet I felt no rush of triumph. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew that revenge wasn't the story anymore. This wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving that I could build something honest, something that didn't require destruction to exist. As I shut the laptop, a faint memory surfaced, my father's voice at that Christmas table laughing as he told me I'd never earn $1. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just understanding. He hadn't been wrong about money. He'd been wrong about me. Outside, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the city in white. The skyline was sharp and clear against the dark, no longer shimmering through a storm. New York blurred behind the snow, softer than I remembered. The lights glimmered faintly, and I realized the collapse of his world wasn't an ending. It was the space where mine began. 3 weeks after the hospital, I found myself back in New York, not for him, not for family, but for business. UBS and Lioncrest had organized what they called the Legacy Roundtable, a high-profile summit on the future of finance, bringing together the new generation of innovators and the remnants of the old guard. Someone somewhere thought it poetic to invite me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The event was being held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same ballroom where my father used to host Taylor & Finch's annual Christmas galas. The chandeliers were the same. The champagne was the same. Even the sound of laughter bouncing off the marble walls was the same. The only difference was me. When I stepped inside, heads turned. Not because of my dress, though it was sharp navy silk that caught the light, but because people knew. They knew what I'd done. They knew I'd taken down my father's empire without ever lifting a weapon. Clara was already there, poised as always, a glass of white wine in her hand. "You're trending again," she said, smirking. I rolled my eyes. "For what? Existing. For redefining legacy," she said. "The media loves their comeback narratives, especially when they involve family fortunes." "Let them," I said. I stopped reading headlines. Across the room, I spotted Ethan. He looked older, heavier, as though the family collapse had aged him overnight. When our eyes met, he hesitated, then started toward me. "Olivia," he said softly, "you look different." "I am different." He nodded, unsure of what to say next. "Dad's recovering. He's been quiet. Reading a lot." "Good," I said. He could use reflection. Ethan studied me carefully. "You know he doesn't hate you, right?" I met his gaze. "I don't need him to love me either." Before he could reply, a voice behind us said, "Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention." It was Marcus stepping onto the stage. His charisma filled the room. Tonight, he began, we celebrate not what finance was, but what it's becoming. For decades, the industry has been ruled by hierarchy, secrecy, and ego. But that era is over. The future belongs to transparency, to innovation, to empathy. He turned toward me. And tonight, that future has a name. A spotlight snapped on. My name flashed across the massive digital screen, Olivia Taylor, CEO, Aurora Global Technologies. Applause rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. For a moment, I just stood there frozen between past and present. Then I walked to the stage. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. "When I started Aurora, I was told I was reckless. I was told I was naive. I was told emotion didn't belong in finance. But emotion is the market. Fear, hope, trust. Those are the real currencies we trade every day. Aurora doesn't erase them. It translates them." I glanced around the room, faces of bankers, investors, analysts, the same crowd that once laughed at me from my father's table. "The future of wealth isn't in control," I continued. "It's in connection." When I finished, the applause came again, louder this time. Clara smiled from her table. Ethan clapped too, though his eyes looked glassy with something unspoken pride, maybe regret. As the evening wound down, I slipped out to the terrace to breathe. The city stretched beneath me, glittering and endless. For the first time, I didn't feel small in front of it. I felt part of it, the rhythm, the pulse, the constant becoming. The sound of a cane tapping against a stone broke my thoughts. I turned, and there he was, my father. He looked smaller than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp. "You speak well," he said. "Doctors cleared you to travel," he smirked. "I don't take orders well, you know that." We stood in silence for a moment, the night air cool between us. "I read about your partnership," he said finally. "UBS. Lioncrest. Impressive. Thank you." He nodded slowly. "I watched the broadcast tonight. You were remarkable." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. "I learned from the best," I said quietly. He chuckled. "You learned in spite of the best." That oddly made me smile. He took a deep breath. "When I built Taylor & Finch, I thought success was power, control. But maybe it's continuity, what survives after we're gone." He looked out over the skyline. "I used to think legacy was about buildings, logos, bank accounts. Now I think it's about impact. You've made one." For a moment, the air between us softened. "You taught me ambition," I said. "You just forgot to teach me mercy." He met my eyes. "Then maybe you can teach it to me." I didn't answer. The words hung there, raw and real, suspended in the hum of the city. After a while, he turned to leave. "Good night, Olivia," he said. "Good night, Dad." He walked back inside his cane, echoing faintly against the marble. I stayed on the terrace long after he left, watching the lights flicker in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were still trading stocks, writing code, making moves. The market never slept. Neither did legacy. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to prove anything, not to him, not to the world. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about evolution. As the wind picked up, I whispered to the skyline, "I'm done fighting ghosts." And in the reflection of the glass, I swore I saw her, the woman I'd been all those years ago, sitting at that Christmas table, holding her breath as her father laughed. She looked back at me and smiled, finally free. The holiday season was usually the time for family peace, but for me, it just brought a different kind of war. The celebratory hum of Aurora's new global partnership faded quickly when Marcus Lee arrived in New York for the holidays and immediately began asserting Lioncrest's vision for Taylor Aurora Capital. I met him in a private room at UBS's headquarters. Clara sat between us, a diplomatic buffer. The merger hadn't even been finalized, but the tension was already thick. "We appreciate your vision for empathy," Olivia Marcus began, smooth as polished steel. "But now we're playing a long game. Empathy is a fantastic brand. Control is how empires survive." I met his gaze. Control is what destroyed Taylor and Finch. Aurora's core strength is understanding human behavior, not suppressing it. "You think your father's collapse was about ethics," Marcus scoffed. "It was about stagnation. He held on to an old model. I, on the other hand, am very interested in your new one." He pushed a detailed acquisition proposal across the table. "Lioncrest is prepared to buy out the remaining Taylor and Finch assets entirely. We absorb the legacy debt, we streamline the structure, and we place a Lioncrest executive in the COO role." "That wasn't the deal," I said, my voice dangerously even. "The deal was a 50-50 partnership. I run the entity, full creative control." Marcus leaned back, his dangerous smile flickering. "The deal was before we realized how much dead weight the Taylor name carries. We need to cut deeper, faster. We respect your triumph, but we need ruthless efficiency now." Clara intervened softly. "Marcus, Olivia is the architect of the behavioral model. Undermining her control risks the entire Aurora value proposition. And that's why she needs to focus on the product," Clara Marcus countered. "I will handle the legacy cleanup. It's the kind of battle she's proven she wants to be done with." His words hit harder than he intended. He was right. I was done fighting the ghosts of Taylor and Finch, but I wasn't done fighting for what Aurora stood for. "Send me the proposal," I said finally. "I'll look at it." That evening I drove out to my mother's home in Greenwich. She was alone wrapping gifts. Edward was still recovering at a specialized facility, quietly detached from the collapsing world he'd built. "Olivia," my mother said, looking relieved. "I'm glad you're here." "I'm here about Ethan," I said. She sighed, setting down a roll of wrapping paper. "He won't leave the city. He's sleeping on a pull-out couch in his old office. He says he needs to be there in case Dad calls. His office is gone, Mom. His old role is gone. He's just waiting for a ghost. He doesn't know what else to do," she whispered. "He's always been the successor, never the builder." That night I called Ethan. "Liv, I'm busy," he said, his voice ragged. "You're waiting for Dad to tell you what to do next," I stated. Silence. "I have a proposal for you," I continued. "Lioncrest wants to absorb the remaining Taylor assets. It's brutal, but it's necessary. I need someone on the inside who understands the history to manage the transition. No titles, no legacy, just work." "Why me?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Because you're still a Taylor," I said. "And right now that name is worth something to me. You know where the bodies are buried, Ethan. Now I need you to help me dig them up and give them a proper funeral." He hesitated for a long moment. "You want me to help dismantle what Dad spent his life building?" "No," I replied. "I want you to help me redefine it. What about the merger? What about Lioncrest?" "That's my problem," I said, "and I deal with my own problems." The next morning I rejected Marcus Lee's proposal. I wasn't cutting Ethan out of my new empire, and I wasn't letting Marcus Lee turn Taylor Aurora Capital into another ruthless acquisition machine. I sent Marcus a counteroffer. "Ethan Taylor runs the debt acquisition and legacy dissolution. He reports to me. This merger is about evolution, not elimination, or there is no deal." The game was changing. I was done fighting my father. Now I had to fight my partners to protect the true legacy I was building. The following morning, I woke to a dozen missed calls from Zurich, Singapore, and New York. Aurora had become impossible to ignore. UBS wanted a deeper partnership, Lioncrest proposed a full-scale expansion, and even the European Central Bank had requested a briefing on Aurora's emotional AI index. It was all moving faster than I could process, the kind of momentum you dream about when you start with nothing but a half-broken processor and stubborn belief. but amid the storm of opportunity, a different kind of call came in. It was my father. His voice, frail yet deliberate, carried the weight of something final. "Olivia, we need to meet," he said. "Not as a family, as business people." I agreed. Against my better judgment, I drove to the old Taylor and Finch headquarters, now half abandoned, its logo peeled from the facade, its legacy sold off in fragments. The security guard recognized me instantly and waved me through. I didn't belong here anymore, but I walked through those marble halls as if I owned them. When I stepped into his office, it was as though time had folded in on itself. The room smelled faintly of dust and old ambition. He was seated behind his desk, not the man who once towered over the markets, but someone older, quieter. "You came?" he said, gesturing toward the chair opposite him. "You asked." He nodded slowly, studying me with eyes that no longer burned with arrogance, but something closer to acceptance. "I read the UBS statement," he said. 8.6 million. Private client status. You've surpassed every benchmark I ever set for myself." "I wasn't competing with you," I said evenly. He smiled, a small, tired thing. "You were. You just didn't know it." We sat in silence for a moment, the air between us thick with unspoken history. Then he leaned forward. "I've been approached by your partners at Lioncrest. They're proposing a merger, Aurora's technology, my firm's remaining assets. A new entity." I blinked. "My partners did what? They reached out." "Discreetly," he said. "Apparently they think the Taylor name still carries value." I laughed softly. "Value or nostalgia?" "Both," he said. "But hear me out, Olivia. They're calling it the Taylor-Aurora Alliance, a bridge between traditional finance and emotional AI. You'd run it. I'd advise. The old him would have demanded control. The new him was asking permission." I studied his face. "Why now?" He looked past me toward the window where the city glowed in fragments of winter light. "Because I finally understand what you were building. You weren't chasing markets. You were humanizing them. I fought that because I thought emotion was weakness. But I see now it's the only thing that makes money mean anything." It was strange hearing wisdom from the man who once defined my failures. "I don't need your name," I said carefully. "Aurora stands on its own." He nodded. "You don't. But maybe the world does. A name like Taylor still opens doors for people who can't yet imagine your world." His honesty disarmed me. For the first time in years, I didn't see a rival. I saw an aging architect trying to reconcile his past with the future standing in front of him. "What do you want from me, Dad?" "Forgiveness," he said simply. "And one last deal. Let's build something together, not for legacy, but for redemption." I should have said no. The rational part of me screamed to walk away. But some part of me, the part still tethered to the girl who once sat across from him at those Christmas dinners, humiliated and small, wanted closure. "Fine," I said. "But this isn't charity. It's a contract." He smiled faintly, spoken like my daughter. The following week became a blur of negotiations and meetings. UBS hosted the discussions in their Manhattan boardroom, all-glass silence and Swiss efficiency. My team from Aurora faced off against a skeleton crew of Taylor and Finch executives who'd survived the collapse. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Let's be clear. I began standing at the head of the table. This isn't a rescue. It's an evolution. Aurora doesn't absorb broken systems. We transform them. No one dared argue. When the documents were signed, the new name glowed on the digital screen behind us, Taylor Aurora Capital. The merger was official. The journalists called it a symbolic handshake between eras. I called it symmetry. The daughter who'd once been told she'd never earn a dollar had just signed off on the resurrection of the very empire that had rejected her. That night we celebrated at a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. My father sat beside me, sipping black coffee, his face softer than I'd ever seen it. "You look happy," I said. "I'm relieved," he replied. "It's strange. For the first time, I feel like I can stop building." I smiled faintly. "That's my job now." He nodded, pride flickering behind his eyes. You know, Olivia, when I used to say you'd never earn a dollar, I wasn't doubting your intelligence. I was doubting your resilience. I didn't think you had the patience for the long game. And now, he chuckled softly. Now I think I underestimated you by several billion. We both laughed, quiet, real laughter that felt like oxygen after years of smoke. Before leaving, he reached into his coat and handed me an envelope. Inside was an old photo me at age 12 sitting beside him at his office desk staring up at the ticker tape screen with wide-eyed fascination. I kept that, he said. Thought I'd give it to you when you finally understood money. I understand it now, I said. It's not the goal. It's the language. He smiled, eyes glinting. And you speak it better than anyone I know. When we left the restaurant, snow was falling again, thick and slow, muffling the city below. I watched him walk ahead of me slower now, cane tapping softly, and realized that the man who once cast the longest shadow in my life had finally become human again. Back in my apartment that night, I placed the photo on my desk beside the Aurora emblem. For the first time, the two didn't feel at odds. They belonged together, past and future power and empathy, father and daughter. I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out at the city, the skyline that had once mocked me now glittering like applause. The merger wasn't just a business move. It was an ending disguised as a beginning. The next morning, headlines called me the visionary who taught finance empathy. But I didn't care about the titles anymore. Because for the first time in my life, the war was over, and I had won not by defeating him, but by becoming everything he was too afraid to be. It was snow that swallowed sound, and time that Christmas Eve. I stood outside the old Taylor estate, the same one where my story had begun, the house that had once been both a battlefield and a cage. Inside, I could already hear the faint murmur of conversation laughter that sounded almost human again. Clara had insisted we host this year's dinner together. You owe your younger self a better ending, she'd said. I wasn't sure she was right until now. The lights glowed softly through the frosted windows, golden and warm. I hesitated before stepping in, taking one last breath of cold air, one last moment of silence before the past and present collided for good. When I entered, everything stopped. My father was standing near the fireplace, cane in hand, a faint tremor in his fingers. My mother, who had aged gracefully into forgiveness, was arranging the table with care. Ethan and his wife were there too, whispering quietly to their kids, who were too young to sense the ghosts in the room. And then there was me, no longer the girl who once sat there in humiliation, but the woman who'd built a global company, merged empires, and redefined the family name. Olivia, my mother said softly, almost in disbelief. You came. I said I would, I replied, setting down the small box of gifts in my hand. Tradition, right? My father's gaze met mine. The sharpness that once lived in his eyes had softened into something deeper, quieter. You look happy, he said. I am, I said simply. And you? He smiled faintly. Getting there. Dinner was smaller this time. No guests, no speeches, no silver-plated performance. Just family. The apple pie smelled exactly the same, though it somehow tasted sweeter. For a while, we talked about small things, Ethan's new job, Clara's latest project, the children's snowman outside. Ordinary things. Beautifully ordinary. Then halfway through dessert, my father cleared his throat. I saw the UBS report, he said. Aurora's valuation just crossed $30 billion. That's extraordinary. I smiled, cutting into my slice of pie. It's not about the number anymore. He nodded. I know, but still $30 billion. When I was your age, I thought that kind of success required a soul you couldn't afford to lose. You proved me wrong. His words hung in the air like a benediction. He took a deep breath. Do you remember, he continued, what I said that Christmas about you never earning a dollar? I laughed quietly. I remember every word. He exhaled, his voice trembling just slightly. I was wrong, Olivia, because I thought worth and wealth were the same thing. You showed me they never were. For the first time in my life, I saw tears in his eyes. Small, human, unguarded. My mother reached for his hand, and for a moment the room fell still. The fire crackled softly behind us. The snow pressed gently against the windows, and everything that had ever been broken in this house finally began to mend. After dinner, I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was sharp, the world quiet except for the crunch of snow beneath my boots. The night sky was endless, the same sky I used to stare at from my apartment window in those sleepless startup years, wondering if any of it would ever mean something. I thought about legacy, how it isn't built from fortune or reputation, but from the courage to face yourself when no one believes in you. I thought about that phone call from UBS, that moment of vindication that used to define me. It felt small now, distant. The real victory wasn't the 8.6 million or the 30 billion or even the title. It was the quiet of having nothing left to prove. When I turned back toward the house, I saw my father standing by the window watching me. He lifted a hand just slightly and I nodded. No words, no apologies, just understanding. Inside, Clara had turned on soft jazz. Ethan was helping the kids unwrap their presents early. My mother was laughing, genuinely laughing, for the first time in years. I stepped back in and felt something shift inside me, that slow, steady realization that forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a series of small ones. Quiet, patient, deliberate. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone by the fire, my glass of wine half full, the room glowing with the faint shimmer of Christmas lights. On the mantel sat an old photograph, my father and me at his office years ago, before the wars, before the pride, before the words that had haunted both of us. I picked it up, traced the edges, and smiled. My phone buzzed once on the table, a message from Daniel Vogel at UBS. "Merry Christmas, Ms. Taylor. Wishing you peace and continued success." I typed back, "Thank you, Daniel. I already have both." The fire popped softly, sending up a brief flare of light. I leaned back, letting the warmth settle over me, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt whole. No resentment, no rivalry, no unfinished business. Just the quiet satisfaction of a story that had finally found its ending. Somewhere deep inside, I knew this would be the last Christmas in that house. My life had outgrown it. But I also knew I'd carry its lessons with me, the weight and the light of them both. Because revenge, I realized, was never the point. It was only the spark that lit the path back to myself. When the last ember dimmed and the clock struck midnight, I whispered a small private farewell to the ghosts that once ruled me. Then I smiled, stood, and turned off the lights. "Good night," I said to the room that had witnessed every version of me, the dreamer, the failure, the fighter, the builder. And as the snow fell softly against the windows, I stepped into the quiet, endless dark, not as the daughter who had been underestimated, but as the